So there's been a lot of talk lately about mental health, and it had me thinking, why haven't we been talking about this for a while? Why is it something that has just come about in recent times when clearly people have been dealing with mental health issues for long before the mainstream got a grasp of it and started to really project that we got to start talking about mental health. Um, my first initial instinct was maybe because it's not marketable, right? It's not very easy to market a product that can alleviate mental health. If you look at other aspects of your health, for example, if you want to uh, have a certain body type, it's very the steps to get it are very apparent. You go to the gym, you sign up to a gym or you buy your own workout materials, and then you subscribe to a specific fitness plan, and then you go ahead and you buy certain types of foods. It's all laid out for you. The healthy foods, the healthy lifestyle, clean eating, all that stuff is laid out for you. When it comes to mental health, it's a lot more difficult to market something like it has to do with what people's perceptions are, right, and what they're suffering from. Whatever makes me happy, I can't bottle it and give it to you and be like, oh, this makes you happy. Or I can just go to you and go, oh, you're feeling this way. Start thinking this way, and maybe you'll feel better. It doesn't really work out that way, right? Like just an example to push this point, the example of obesity. If someone is obese and they want to go ahead and lose weight, society will basically tell them, okay, well, the first step you have to do is start eating, clean up your diet, eat a certain way, eat a certain amount of calories in versus calories out, and then you got to work out if you want to maintain lean body mass, have a certain amount of protein, etc. It's very like how do I say this? It's like kind of like put it out for you in a step by step process. Like these are the stuff you have to do, and then you can attain whatever you got to. However, with with mental health, it's a lot more difficult. So, and in terms of marketability, I'm sure if big pharma went ahead and pushed antidepressants upon everybody, they'll be making lots of money. So there is a huge market there. So I don't necessarily think that's the case. So I started to try to unravel this more, and I wanted to know, well, okay, why is it something that's been tabooed for so long? And in a way, it still kind of is tabooed. And I started thinking, I'm like, well, if we're discussing mental health, and in order to properly discuss mental health, we got to start acknowledging how difficult it is to live in a society such as this in the Western world. And I'm not saying that Western lifestyle is extremely difficult. That's not what I'm saying. But given the capitalist, the very racialized, the very classist, the very sexist society that we live in, accompanied with obviously the capitalist way of the world, it can reinforce issues of mental health and continue to bring mental health issues to people's minds and have them face it every day, right? So I think that's why it's been tabooed so much, because we aren't allowed to discuss it, because we, in a way, expose the confines of the society and how systemically garbage it really is. It's just something that I want to touch upon in this video. Hopefully, I really get my point across. It is going to be kind of a rant, so I'm going to try my best. I've never done a video before, so I really hope I, communicate what I'm trying to communicate with you. And on that note, I also want you to understand that I'm not an expert in this. This is mainly my thoughts, my opinions on it. You don't have to agree with them. Exit the video right now. Go watch something else. More than welcome. And if you want to sit and listen, then let's kick it. That's what we're here for, right? We're here to open forum. That we want to talk about these initiatives of mental health, and we can go ahead and do that, right? So let's again use the earlier example of obesity, right? When I was first starting to think about it being marketable or not, I'm like, maybe social media has a role, right? Maybe social media has an effect on how we feel. This constant idea of getting likes, and I'll post a picture, maybe people like it. It kind of gives you a certain value to your lifestyle, which is kind of funny to say, but that's just the way the world seems to be going these days. But when you talk about people with mental health, many people would say, and me being one of them, what we often feel is we often feel neglected. And that's the key word here. If I am a person who doesn't have the desirable body type in terms of what society markets as desirable, and I go ahead and put myself on social media and I don't get as much likes as somebody else who's like quote unquote stunning, is going to be, or I'm going to feel like, hey, why I ain't getting no likes for? Like, yeah, I know he's got the six pack and all, but I got some stuff that I can offer too. But, and then I start to feel neglected again. But I didn't think that, the social media avenue was the right way to go, right? However, in terms of neglecting, I think that, or rather statistics show that, these communities that are, neglected and pushed to the margin given the capitalist structure that we live in. And in those areas, if we want to use the topic of obesity, in the United States, the most poverty-ridden areas have the highest rates of obesity. So it kind of, there's an interesting connection there. I don't necessarily, or I'm not necessarily going to go into the stats and hard figures about that and why that is, but the general idea is that because these people are of low income, they tend to go ahead and buy fast foods filled with basically processed foods because they have more bang for your buck. It's a lot easier to go to a fast food chain to feed my family for a lot less than what I would do feed my family at a grocery store, for example. That plays a role. It's also important to note that in these, communities, it's very racialized, right? People of color tend to have the most experience in these communities, and that's because of the colonial manifestation of how the United States and Canada were created, where there's a certain class structure and a certain race structure that ensues, as well as a gendered structure, right? So these things have to be discussed when we talk about mental health, but we don't. We don't talk about these things whatsoever. There's various studies done. If you really go and research this stuff, you can see how correlated they are, right? We're using the topic of marginalized communities. Mainly people of color live there, and they have the highest obesity rates. In fact, in the United States, there was a survey done between, I think, 2014 or 2015 that basically stated that non-Hispanics, blacks in America had the highest rates of obesity, followed by Hispanics, followed by non-Hispanic whites. So basically black, Latino, or Hispanic, and white in that area in terms of most obese population to the least. That's kind of baffling. That's kind of strange because international trends actually say low or higher income nations have higher obesity rates than low income nations, which makes sense because of all the gluttony that we have in society. But in America, it's kind of like the opposite. The lowest income have the highest obesity rates, which is very interesting. I'll post all these stats underneath the video. I don't want to interrogate them too much. I don't want to butcher what they're saying. I want have their voice on it. I'm just here to communicate it. Another thing of note is because of these communities are on the margin, there's a lot of low income. When there is low income, that means the unemployment rates are high. It also means that constant employment in these areas are very few and far between. So there was another study done on that, and the study basically states that they took a survey of 300 men unemployed and 300 men who were employed, and they found over a 18-month or a year period, or whatever the time was, they found that in the unemployed men, or the men who had lost their jobs during that time, there was more frequent visits to the doctor as well as overwhelming depression in comparison to the 300 men who were employed. So you're starting to see how this is all slightly connected, right? How you have the people who are the most neglected, people who face mental health issues are very neglected. In these communities, you often have the same feeling that people who have mental health issues face. Feelings of anxiety and PTSD are very common between both groups. For example, if I am a single mother and I have to, take care of my family and I'm living paycheck to paycheck, there is a lot of anxiety that comes with that. You don't know where your next meal is coming from, and you don't even know if your job will be guaranteed the next day because the constant employment is so thin, it can take a true toll. And if you live in these areas where you tend to lose loved ones at an early age due to maybe due to health reasons or being targeted by law enforcement, it can have an effect on your overall psyche. You can have PTSD, which is a huge mental health issue that people face. So the correlations are there. They need to be discussed. You can't talk about mental health without talking about the overall society that allows it to manifest. As a case study, think of the black struggle in the United States. From the beginning, they were always second-class citizens. Coming here as slaves, they weren't even citizens. Coming here as slaves to do work, to be on the plantations, to be whipped, to be beaten, to be raped. Fast forward hundreds and hundreds of years to the present day, and you can still argue they're not on par with the rest of white society, given what we've seen. We can't talk about mental health without talking about the certain societal structures that allow it to manifest. It just can't be done. And the more I thought of it that way, is the more I realized, that's why it's been tabooed. It's been tabooed because talking about mental health completely contradicts the prototypical, American or Western dream of civilization. How it was built upon, racism. It's built upon sexism, built upon classism. It was built upon heteronormativity, right? It's all of these things that have built this society, but because it groups us and confines us into certain things and certain groups, it really perpetuates an idea of always trying to fit into some place, even if it doesn't mean being yourself. And that's where a lot of the mental trauma comes in, because if you can't truly express yourself for who you are, because you will be looked down upon or judged in a certain way by society, you can't fully live a healthy lifestyle. It doesn't seem to make sense. So if we want to talk about mental health, these are the stuff we got to talk about. These are the stuff we got to interrogate. Why is it difficult being a person of color in Canada and the United States? Why is it so difficult for Native people to just acclimatize to society? Why are gays, lesbians, trans, queer all have a hard time when it comes to expressing themselves? Why are women still looked down? Why do I have to go through 6 years of schooling to only not to get a job because of the neoliberal economy that we live in? Right? These are the questions that we got to talk about that just continue, and these are the societal structures that continue to push the idea or that, this is the best way of living, and we all just got to deal with it, or else you're just weak. You're just a weak person because we all do this and you don't. Look at that language. Look at the language that is being used, always making us seem like we're not good enough. In fact, we are good enough. But society doesn't allow us to fulfill our true potential. And I know I may be going on a tangent right now. It is a bit of a rant for me, so I'm going to try to bring it back down. I'm so sorry about that. But back to the mental health. When we start discussing this is when we truly start to get to the crux of these issues, because these are the issues, right? We have to not just talk about how we feel and why we feel this way, but what's allowing us to feel this way. When we say, oh, it's just in your head, we're confining it as our perception. It's not our perception only. It is a fucked up world, and we have to acknowledge it. We have to acknowledge the way it is. It's the only way we can move forward, right? If I call a hotline and I tell them how I feel, yes, it feels great that somebody's listening, and you should always talk about your problems. It feels good that that person listens to me over the phone. I hang up feeling a bit better, right? But once I hang up that phone, my reality in front of me doesn't change. I'm still living a life where I'm trying to find work. I'm struggling to be myself. I have to put food on the table for my family, whatever it may be. That world doesn't change after that phone call. That person is only there to listen to you. It's kind of like a placebo effect while the reality stays the same. So we have to discuss these things. And when we do, we make people uncomfortable. It's funny now, people who suffer from mental health are always uncomfortable. Now we're trying to talk about things like this and people, oh, that's uncomfortable. What are you talking about? Again, neglected, pushed to the margins. You're back to the periphery, right? And an example of people not liking, talking about these things is think of hip hop music. Hip hop music historically was a political movement, and it was a movement that, if you study the lyrics, dealt with a lot of these issues and had rappers and artists put down their mental health issues in a line, made it rhyme, and put it beside a beat. It was amazing. It was liberating, right? Until hip hop movement became, or the hip hop music and the movement itself became kind of a threat because, hey, these people talking about some real issues, we can't have that. Oh my God. God forbid, young black males and females are out there speaking their minds and starting to monetize off of it, starting to put out the realities of life. So hip hop became co-opted. Listen to the lyrics now. Nothing like they were before. On the mainstream, there's lots of rappers doing their thing right now, and I love you all. I love you all. But on the mainstream, now I put up some stuff on the radio, that meaning is gone. Who runs these corporations? Billionaires. Those billionaires aren't people of color. We can talk about that in the next video, how hip-hop has been co-opted, and we can break down some lyrics, and I can talk about hip-hop all day because I love it, but we're not going to go there now. This video was way too long. I didn't mean to go on such a huge rant, so I'm going to wrap it up. Keep that in mind. If you want to talk about mental health, then let's talk about society overall and how it is on the overall scale and how it perpetuates our mental health issues as opposed to actually relieving them. And let's talk about things that matter and how we can go ahead and move forward instead of just picking up the phone hoping everything is okay. Thank you guys so much for listening. I really hope I didn't bore you. I'm going to try to make this a thing. I'll keep y'all posted as to how it goes. All right, thank you.